Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your daily source of Black news, views, and opinions. Today is Friday, April 8th, and I'm Mimi Brown.
I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Lobo, and on today's report, the White House is celebrating Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation today. We'll tell you why she will stay on the U.S. Court of Appeals just a little longer until she is officially sworn in this summer. Now, meanwhile, a judge ruled this week in favor of HIV-positive military members. This after the Air Force was sued by military members who were discharged in relation to a ban on people who were HIV positive. Then, Denver Mayor Michael Hancock says his police force was not ready for the number of protesters that took over his city, after almost a dozen protesters had their free speech rights and rights to be protected from unreasonable force violated.
Plus, Rihanna is the first billionaire of her home country, Barbados. What launched the singer into billionaire status? And Bill Bellamy gives us his thoughts on this week's hottest topics. We're talking about that little side eye we normally give you. It's happening today, soulmates. It is Friday. Thank you. It's our voice and our truth. So let's get it.
So what's next for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson and the Supreme Court now that the historic confirmation is over? How much of an impact will the first black woman justice have on a 6-3 conservative majority court? Joining us today is Gloria Brown Marshall. She's a professor of constitutional law at John Jay College in New York and the author of She Took Justice, The Black Woman, Law, and Power. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So yesterday was also a historic day in another way. It was the first time an African-American woman presided over a confirmation vote in the U.S. Senate. VP Harris said it was a great moment for her and a great moment for America. Let's take a listen.
I was so honored as the Vice President of the United States, but as the President of the Senate, to sit in the Senate chamber this afternoon and witness America elevate an extraordinary jurist who is a black woman to the highest court of our land.
And so seeing that, but what impact will Judge Jackson have on this majority conservative court, Gloria?
Well, and initially she's going to be a peacemaker in a way, but think about it this way. They have been isolated as well. They haven't been under the same roof because of the pandemic. And so now we are going to have them come back together post-pandemic, and she's one who's going to be a bridge builder. But she may be, of course, dissenting right now, but those dissenting opinions today could be the majority opinions in the future. That's what Justice Ginsburg taught us anyway. And she's going to be a bridge builder, but also someone who's going to be writing exceptional opinions because she's very detail oriented.
Exceptional opinions. You know, it's a little early to predict what cases Judge Jackson will hear, but what issues do you think will come before her and some of the other justices?
Well, right now we're looking for another abortion case. There are voting rights cases. There are cases involving criminal justice. And we're concerned also about the Harvard affirmative action case. She was on the trustees board there at Harvard. And so she recused herself, taking herself off of deciding that case before the court. And it could be the end of affirmative action. We also understand that the other justices, for example, Justice Gorsuch, is not recusing himself. Justice Thomas is not recusing himself. And so it's going to be even more lopsided for the conservatives because she is deciding to do that when they're not.
You know, Gloria, you mentioned abortion. So I wanted to talk about Roe v. Wade and the restrictive abortion laws in Texas and Mississippi. I know that they could soon make their way to the court next session. But how important are issues like that for black women?
Very important. I think it's understood that Black women also have issues regarding reproductive services. Planned Parenthood and other organizations, Whole Women's Health, don't just do abortions. They also work with women's health issues. To be closed down, underfunded, I think it's going to be something that Black women across the country are facing because of the income gap. They're reliant, and we are, more on these types of social services than I believe other groups, especially white women.
Absolutely. And you kind of touched on this as well with justices not recusing themselves. We know that Clarence Thomas and his wife, Jenny, they've been in the news lately. The New York Times revealing that Jenny was actively working with the Trump administrations to overthrow the 2020 election. And, many are calling for Judge Thomas to recuse himself from those election cases. And yesterday, the House just passed a bill calling for a code of ethics for the High Court. But what should be done, in your opinion, to make sure that justices, they don't have those ethical issues when it comes to the cases that may come before them?
It's very difficult. Federal court judges sit for life, not just Supreme Court justices. And so it's a personal decision as to whether or not they're going to recuse themselves. I was a law clerk for a federal trial court judge as well as a state court judge. And I know that it's up to their personal discretion whether or not they believe there is a conflict. And we know there have been conflicts of interest. And I'll give you an example with Justice Gorsuch. His mother was the former director of the Environmental Protection Agency, and she ended her reign there in disgrace because it was thought that she was taking some advantage of the situation, we'll say. But my concern is he is now deciding the powers of the Environmental Protection Agency now in this term and in future terms. But he hasn't recused himself at all, even though this could be seen as an act of revenge against the agency because of what happened to his mother. So I think that the progressives go out of their way to recuse themselves, and the conservatives never do.
Absolutely. Well, Gloria, thank you so much for joining us. Gloria Brown Marshall is a professor of constitutional law at John Jay College in New York. We would love to have you back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mimi.
Absolutely.
The White House is celebrating Judge Jackson's confirmation today. President Biden, VP Harris, and Judge Jackson met with Democratic allies to celebrate the first black woman on the High Court. Judge Jackson says her confirmation is the greatest honor in her life. She will not take her place on the court until Justice Stephen Breyer officially retires this summer.
It's a powerful thing when people can see themselves in others. Think about it. What's the most powerful thing? I'll bet every one of you can go back and think of a time in your life where there was a teacher, a family member, a neighbor, somebody who made you believe that you could be whatever you wanted to be. It's a powerful, powerful, powerful notion. That's one of the reasons I believe so strongly that we needed a court that looks like America.
Judge Jackson's confirmation hearing were a shameful spectacle. Yes, that's what Anita Hill said in an opinion piece in yesterday's Washington Post. Hill, as you remember, accused Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas of sexual harassment in 1991. She said the confirmation process is broken and the panel must act to restore people's faith in it. Hill was subjected to personal attacks by the panel when she described Thomas's alleged harassment at the EEOC. She is now a professor of social policy, law, and women's studies at Brandeis University.
And House Democrats are trying to help restaurant owners still struggling after the pandemic. The House passed a $55 billion aid package for restaurants and other industries hurt by the pandemic shutdowns. The bill passed 223 to 203, with only 6 Republicans joining Democrats. The bill will provide $42 billion to replenish a fund that ran out last year for restaurants, food trucks, bars, and bakeries. The bill is now headed to the Senate.
Former President Barack Obama, he says that he underestimated how vulnerable democracies are to disinformation. Mr. Obama made the statement at the University of Chicago. The issue of misinformation and disinformation are relevant as Russia lies about why they started the invasion of Ukraine. He said that he noticed the trend late in his second term, but didn't realize how powerful that it would become. Moscow was also lying about its recent attacks on civilians that have left hundreds dead. Obama says democracy in the U.S. is threatened by disinformation spread by right-wing extremists.
New York's Attorney General wants to hold Donald Trump in civil contempt for his effort at slowing down her civil tax fraud investigation. In court filings yesterday, Letitia James said Trump failed to comply with a judge's order to turn over subpoena documents to her office. James is asking the judge to fine the former president $10,000 a day until he turns over the documents. Trump called James's request, quote, a continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time. The New York Attorney General says the Trump organization inflated financial statements in order to get bank loans.
And the police chief who took over the Colorado Police Department during the Elijah McClain fallout has been fired. The decision to fire Chief Vanessa Wilson comes as an investigation found more than 2,500 backlogged criminal probes. Wilson was hired after the fallout from Elijah McClain's killing by cops in 2019. The 23-year-old was walking home from a convenience store when someone called the cops saying he looked suspicious. Police put McClain in a chokehold, killing him. The city paid McClain's family $15 million to settle a lawsuit.
And an African-American history teacher is suing a white 10th grader for harassing and taunting him by leaving a banana in the doorway of his classroom. Joel Mungo says that he first found a banana in front of his Newport News classroom back in October. Mungo says he kept finding bananas outside of his door for up to 6 months. School surveillance cameras showed one of his students leaving the fruit as they walked down the hall. The student was suspended for 2 days. Bananas have been used by racists for decades against black people, and Mungo says that he filed the suit because he's fed up with racism in and around our academic institutions. And so this goes back, first things first, his teacher's been teaching for 21 years, and so he's not a new teacher, he's not a sub, he's not filling in. He's been a teacher for a very long time. And this goes back to a story that we've talked to before about black male teachers having an invisible tax that they have to deal with. So, black teachers, they're teaching young students, black students, females and males, how to deal with racism outside of the classroom. True. But here he is, this man has to worry about racism right in his classroom. And it's just mere disrespect for this teacher on all levels.
Absolutely, Demi. And it was a 10th grade student, and he's a history teacher. So you wouldn't think that he would know the history behind a banana if you leave a banana at his door, what you're trying to say. And at that, this is a learned behavior. This is something that he's getting at home. This is something like kids aren't born racist. So this is something that you've heard, something that you've seen. And I read a little bit into this, and it says that the parents were irate initially until he wanted him to be expelled from school. So once the talk of expulsion came up, the parents were like, oh, it's no big deal. It's just a banana. What's the problem? That tells me everything I need to know about the attitude, of the family and how he was raised, because that's not okay.
No, experiencing some of this, in middle school back in St. Louis, it was a huge issue. I had encountered some of this myself. But yeah, the parents have to be held accountable. You're absolutely right, Mimi. It's important that happens. It's a 10th grader. It's not a little young kid thinking it's a joke. Maybe he saw it on TikTok or something like that. Here's someone that knows what they're doing and continue to do it. If you think about black male teachers as it is, the number is so low across our country. We want that number to grow, but how can you encourage black men to want to go into schools and teach if they have to encounter this on a daily basis?
Romeo, I do want to put some of it back on social media though too, because you have what grade is Malachi in right now?
Malachi's in 3rd grade.
Malachi's in 3rd. So he has a long way to go. But my point here is that if Malachi were to go to school, and you have an 8-year-old as well, if you were to go to school, either of them, and do something bad that you didn't teach them, there are certain things that children learn right on social media that they do think is funny. Right, because either of you are parents, you wouldn't want for someone to blame Mimi or Romeo for being a bad parent because your child learned something on social media and went to school and thought it was funny.
But this kid is old enough to know.
Yeah, he's in 10th grade. He's old enough to know right from wrong. And he did it on more than one occasion, which says, he thought it was funny. He knew the history behind it because he had 6 other teachers. He only did it to the black guy. Okay?
Says it all right there. HIV-positive military members can now become officers and deploy in active duty outside of the United States. A U.S. district judge ruled this week in favor of 3 service members in 2 separate cases. The plaintiffs in the case sued the Air Force after they were discharged in relation to a ban on overseas deployment of people who are HIV positive. The judge also told the Secretary of the Air Force to reverse the discharge orders for the airmen. The Trump administration expanded on the policy when it instituted a rule declaring any service member who cannot deploy outside the U.S. for more than a year should be let go.
And the city of Denver is appealing a court verdict that awarded $14 million to protesters who were assaulted by cops during the 2020 George Floyd demonstrations. Denver Mayor Michael Hancock says his police force was not ready for the number of protesters that took over his city. A jury found that 11 protesters had their free speech rights and their rights to be protected from unreasonable force violated. Shotguns and bags filled with lead were dispersed into a peaceful crowd. One man says he was hit in the head by a beanbag fired from a shotgun. He was hospitalized with head injuries.
A Louisiana sheriff is standing by one of his officers after he shot a man in the face. Investigators say an officer responding to a 911 call of a car stuck with two men sitting in a partly submerged car. The deputy says that he saw Jacoby Williams, one of the men, with a semi-automatic weapon on his lap. Now, when they tried to pull the man out of the car, the person pulled away. Investigators say that's when the officer shot Jacoby Williams in the face. Williams is in a New Orleans hospital in critical condition, and police say they will arrest him when he's released.
Louisiana state lawmakers are considering a bill that would ban the release of mugshots of people who have been arrested but not convicted of a crime. The State House passed the bill, but it will have a way to go. It must get through the Senate, then it must be signed by the governor, state representative. And it says the mugshots can ruin the reputation of people who are never convicted of a crime. The representative says it files in the face of innocent until proven guilty. 6 other states in the U.S. have been taking up bills addressing this issue as well. I think this is so important. I like this, and I think it should be all across the country. Now, people get in trouble years later when they tweet something, they say something, but you're saying it. You're guilty of what you send, right? What you post. But in this particular case, some people are found innocent, but it could dampen them moving forward in their career and things of that nature, and it could really damage their reputation. So I encourage this to happen across the country.
Absolutely, Romeo. I agree with you, but the reality is that there are people that are actually fighting against this. There are people that are very upset about this, who feel like the community deserves to know who is being arrested. They deserve to know who is where and all of that. But I feel like, with how you feel, Romeo, there are certain things that we don't need to know. We don't need to know. And also, this is going to fall on a lot of black people, black men and black women, who are the ones who get our mugshots out there. And we don't,
Well, that's what I was going to say, Demi. It's going to fall on us. I mean, imagine if, I hate to use it as an example, Romeo, but imagine if, how many times have you been told you fit the description, right? And you get arrested. And now your mugshot is plastered everywhere, and they find out, oh my gosh, we have the wrong person. I am so sorry. Well, the damage is done. Your reputation is soiled. So at that point, then what? You can't an apology is not going to take that back.
Right.
So this is a great idea. This is something that we should actually, you're right, look into implementing all over the country.
Mimi, and I hate to keep referring back to social media, but again, like you said, social media is so damaging now. This was back in the day, back where our parents were growing up, and we didn't have social media, but now one mugshot can literally go everywhere. It can be on the Shade Room, it can be on Foxhole's Black. I mean, you just never know where it can end up, and the effects are so damaging that we really do need to make sure that we protect everyone, because this is not just a black issue. Honestly, it's an everybody issue.
It's an everybody issue, and there's also this race to be first all the time, right? So the fact checking that used to go into journalism is no longer there, because everyone's in this race to be first, to get the information out first, right? So if you're plastering people's mugshots so that you can beat the competition, you are doing a disservice to yourself as a journalist and that person who may be innocent.
And imagine you are innocent, you get this job, and someone at your job place dislikes you, and then they find it online and they post it. Then they're kind of like throwing you on the bus for something that you were not accused of at the end of the day. So that is a problem. Hopefully they can fix this.
Absolutely. Okay, guys. Well, good news for people living in Georgia. Juneteenth is now a paid holiday. This week, Governor Brian Kemp signed a bill into law that brings the state in alignment with the federal holiday. The bill passed with bipartisan support. This year's Juneteenth, though, falls on a Sunday, so the federal and state holiday will be celebrated on that Monday, the 20th. The date became a federal holiday last year.